Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Metaphysical Apothecary podcast. Megan and I are going to be talking about a magical topic today, liminal spaces, what they are, what they can be, how we can use them for our craft.
Liminal spaces, for anyone who may not know what they are, they're a boundary between two or more points of time, space, or both. So we're actually interacting with liminal spaces all the time, every day. Every time you pass through a doorway, every time you use a hallway or a stairwell, every time you use a footpath between two spaces, those are all liminal areas that we interact with.
Physical liminal areas.
Yes, we're also going to be talking about the metaphysical ones.
As well as time, because another liminal space that we interact with all the time is midnight.
Yes, absolutely.
There's also twilight, whether it's daybreak or sunset twilight.
The twilight of the night or the twilight of the day.
And then there's the yearly times of the solstice and the equinoxes that are liminal spaces.
Mm-hmm. As well as anyone who follows the Gregorian calendar, the 7 days between Christmas and New Year's Day every year. I always just feel like I'm completely untethered from any kind of pattern or passage of time during that week.
I usually go from the solstice to the first. So the 12 days of Christmas, the 12 days of Yule, that's my liminal space. We're in this in-between zone of ending and beginning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have all of these thresholds, which is what liminal space means. It comes from the Latin limen, which means threshold. So it's this either physical or metaphysical or temporal pocket between two more substantial things.
Well, we're using a liminal space by connecting your physical point and my physical point via anchor.
That's true. We are. Why are these spaces important to us as magical practitioners? It's because they're rife with all kinds of possibility. Anything can happen in them. They're places where it's easier to cross other kinds of thresholds, portals to other dimensions. So if you're traveling on the astral, it's a good place to be. If you're trying to reach through any kind of a veil to the Fae, to the world of the dead, please know what you're doing if you're trying to do that, to other timelines that may exist, to the past or to the future.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things are easier to do in a liminal space. I love hanging out in stairwells. I'm that creepy person in college who used to sit in the stairwell. I'm that weird kid in school who enjoyed reading in the hallway.
Yeah, I ate lunch in the stairwell.
So that's the other thing. If you're attracted to these kinds of places, any of these kinds of spaces that we've been talking about, you like to sit in shadows, you enjoy being that creepy kid in the stairwell, there might be something more there for you to look at, to sort of unearth. We would love to hear from others. Tell us whether or not you feel like you live in the liminal. Are you the creepy kid who hangs out in the stairwell?
Or are you the kid who's trying to keep the creepy kid from being too creepy?
Trying to steward their energy for them so that they don't burn out sitting in the in-between. There are also certain deities that thrive in a liminal space. Hecate is the first one that comes to mind for a lot of people because she is the queen of the liminal space. She literally is the goddess of pathways in the crossroads. It's the ultimate liminal space. She's a goddess of death and that bridge between life and death. She holds a torch and creates shadows. Shadows are where light and darkness cross over. It's the liminal space between those two states of light.
Mm-hmm.
She's also a psychopomp, and a psychopomp is a being that escorts souls from the land of the living to the land of the dead. That journey is liminal. So Hecate happens to be one of my deities on my pantheon, and I work with her quite often. And when I work with her, I will occupy a liminal space most of the time when I'm trying to honor her. So another deity I work with, and I work with a lot of deities who walk the liminal. Freya is another one who walks the liminal. She is a psychopomp. She is both the goddess of love and death. And she's a goddess of war as well. So that gap sort of in the center of that triangle, that's where she lives. And she rules that space. Lilith goes back and forth between being this demonized character who's this villain that murders children and abuses people in their sleep, to being an amazing, incredible feminist archetype who guards the weak and the broken who cannot guard themselves. And she allows herself to be demonized in order to remain in the public sphere, so that those of us who want to break through the barrier between who she's portrayed as and who she actually is can do so. Anyone who has listened to us for any length of time knows that I also follow Lucifer. He's my guardian angel, and he walks the liminal because in my practice, he is the guardian of consciousness and the physical realm, but he's also the conduit for divine energy in this dimension. One of the conduits, is not the conduit, but he is definitely a very significant conduit for that, because he guards and guides many of the things that happen in this physical dimension. When I work with him, I'm working usually in some kind of space that has a lot of wind.
One of my deities on my pantheon is Persephone. I'm sure I've mentioned her before on the podcast. And she rules the liminal space. She walks the liminal. She walks between being the dutiful daughter and the independent woman and the responsive wife. Not dutiful wife, not obedient wife, but someone who's responding to the needs of her family, in her husband, in the dogs that they keep, in the spirits that they've adopted to take care of. She's responding to their needs, not necessarily catering to them, just responding. Autumn equinox and Ostara at the spring equinox. Once when she's going through the liminal to go from the land of the living, the above world, into the land of the dead, where she will be queen, and on the other side where she's coming up out of the underworld into the land of the living to spend time with her mother and her friends, give offerings to her. So she's a deity who rules liminal in stages of life, in times of the year, the goddess of spring and blossoming flowers and ripening fruit, and then also the goddess of transitioning from living being to ghost to underworld resident, ruling the underworld. So there's also that transition of life and death. The Morian is a triple goddess for me, and so she rules the liminal space between Maiden Mother Crone, life, birth, and death, and as well as ghosts. She rules over ghosts. She's a goddess of both sovereignty and death, war, dying. She's also a liminal deity for me. Persephone, for me, kind of more relaxed about it. She'll come over and be like, hey, you know this is a liminal space, right? Right? Okay, use it. Bye. Whereas the Morgana is sitting there going, hello, do I have to spell this out for you? Because if I do, I'm going to get a wooden spoon. You should know better.
Should already know this was there, right? And even if you don't work with any deities at all, or you don't necessarily have deities who are in liminal space, you can still use liminal space. This is just one of the ways that we connect. You can also work in the liminal yourself. You can do some really powerful workings there. And there are some really surprising places that you can find liminal energy. So we've already named a few that are pretty obvious, but there are a couple more that, not even a couple more, there are literally hundreds more, but we're going to talk about some of our favorites and the ways in which we like to sort of work with those energies or just sit in the energy. So talking about being the creepy kid, I actually really enjoy existing in funeral homes. Hopefully they're empty. There's no funeral going on while I'm there. Sometimes they'll just allow you to kind of come in and peacefully meditate as long as there's nothing going on. I really enjoy the opportunity to do that because funeral homes are uniquely designed to absorb sound. They're very quiet. They have a lot of plush surfaces, and they literally represent that intangible space between the living and the dead. And it's a space that I can go and just feel extremely calm and peaceful and contemplative and think about the idea of that evolution of the spirit moving from one iteration to the next. Plus, it's a great place to go if you're just feeling overwhelmed in a sensory way.
I really enjoy doing that at cemeteries. And while I enjoy the cemetery walk where it's gravestones and tombstones, and you're just walking through, communing in that liminal space as a living being visiting. But I have to say that the most liminal space cemetery I've ever walked through, had the privilege of walking through, was some of the cemeteries in New Orleans, because they are literally cities of the dead with buildings, and you're just walking through what feels like streets of quiet homes and buildings of these people who have lived and been buried here and still have a presence, because their families, their minds are still coming back to tend to those buildings, to tend to that area, otherwise they get replaced. There's this bridge between the living and the dead that happens there that is so strong for me. I just feel so at peace, and I can recharge really quickly.
Yep.
And yet it's in the middle of the city. So I can hear the cars, I can hear the jazz. If you're lucky enough, sometimes you'll have a parade that you can join as they walk the dead to the cemetery. The ones that I've encountered are very friendly, and if you want to join, you can go ahead and join the parade. They are not going to stop you. So you have this celebration of their life as they're being brought to the city of the dead, and it's just this very harmonic, and I can recalibrate so much quicker than I can almost anywhere else.
Yeah.
There's this land that almost mimics what living people would live in with nature. You can have the crickets and the insects because they're very much a part of the decomposing element. So you don't want them to go away. You want them there.
Right.
Meanwhile, in your living house, you do not want insects there.
No, you don't. Not usually.
So there's this like flip side to everything that happens when I'm in that setting, where it's like, okay, everything that holds true in the living city is not necessarily holding true here. And there's this flux of what is truth. And I can recalibrate myself to understanding my own authentic truth, because I'm not being forced to see the social norm truth.
Right.
I am very, very morbid, apparently.
I feel like anyone who's listened to us before is not shocked.
I would hope not.
I mean, to anyone who is a new listener, welcome to our podcast. We like to hang out in graveyards and funeral homes. Well, we both talked about using liminal spaces to replenish our energy and regain our equilibrium. And I feel like that's because a liminal space, it's a connection point, right? So it offers a balance between where you've come from and where you're going. So it's a great place to access, since the veil between the physical world and other dimensions is so very thin, so much easier to access that well of energy that feeds our dimension when you're in a liminal space like that, especially one that has to do with human transition.
Another human transition that has very little to do with the transition between life and death is the rite of passage between a sweet 15 or a sweet 16 or a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. So the town that I happen to live in, we have a beautiful view of New York City. It is picturesque. Because of that, there are a lot of sweet 15, sweet 16 bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvah pictures that happen along our cliffside that overlooks New York City. And on my walks, I am usually walking through the rites of passages of another person. They are very hard to zigzag around. So you usually end up zigzagging through the people who are celebrating that rite of passage. And this is a type of transition moment. Usually that transitional liminal space is more stressful for me than the transitional liminal space of a cemetery or a graveyard or a funeral home. But I still raise energy. My physical energy gets faster because I'm moving through that space.
Why do you find those spaces in particular stressful?
There's humans involved.
Makes sense.
They are excited. They're trying to get the perfect shot. but that means that they're not being as considerate as the people who are just living their life in our town. And they tend to take up the entire sidewalk or the entire park that they want to be taking the picture in. It gets a little stressful because you're trying to duck and weave and move around the big, beautiful dresses or the people with cameras, or deal with the limousines that are trying to park and they can't park because there's not enough room to park. Also, as a person who can empath, their emotions of frustration come on in waves. The energy that I have for interacting with people depletes pretty quickly, but my physical energy starts to raise because I need to get out of that as fast as possible, and it will stick with me longer.
That makes sense.
We also have another rite of passage or initiation that happens in the same way with the same stress levels. Wedding pictures.
Yep.
Wedding pictures happen all the time there as well, and they are all fighting for the one perfect space, for the one perfect shot.
Yep. So that's all we have on our topic for today. Thank you so much for listening in, and we hope you'll join us again soon. In the meantime, you can follow us for more witchy wisdom, both here and on our blog, and you can also check out our original art on Society 6 for sacred decor and more. Thanks again for joining us. Go make some magic and live your best life.
Bye!